So I'm thinking of the past tonight and remembering a time when poets like Louis and Frank Scott and John Glasgow and others welcomed new poets. They were very welcoming people. And I was treated only with kindness and respect by all of those poets as when I first published work here. So these poems are from a short group of poems that I've been working on, called "Beginning in Montreal," and they're a kind of memoir and a return to the past of what it was like to be a poet back in the Vehicule Poet days and before of the early 1970s. I remember my early years as a poet listening to Anthology on CBC radio on Saturday evenings, hearing Canadian poets reading their work, meeting other young poets, Guy Burchard and Artie Gold, becoming friends and visiting Artie at his home, a second-floor flat on Lorne Crescent, buying books at the Word bookstore on Milton in the McGill ghetto, and being friends with Lucy and Adrian, giving my first poetry reading at Karma Coffee House at Sir George Williams University, somehow brave that evening and made welcome as a poet, taking a creative writing class with Richard Summer, learning about experimental poetry from him, taking the bus downtown at 7 p.m. for poetry readings at the university, going to every reading for 4 years, meeting Al Purdy and Earl Burney, meeting F.R. Scott, meeting many poets who came to read in Montreal, studying at McGill with Louis Dudek, sitting with Dudek in his office, knowing that I was on the right path because of Louis. It was in the green archetypal fields of poetry that I walked when I was young and at the beginning of things. I used to teach with Bill Goodwin, and Bill Goodwin is Irving Layton's nephew, but really they were like brothers. They were about the same age. And this is a poem about a reading that Irving Layton did at Champlain College, where I used to teach. Driving by Dominion Square in the rain, it was a dark October night. Was it Bill Goodwin who was driving us into the city from the college where Irving Layton had just read his poems? Layton, sitting in the front passenger seat, turned to ask my opinion of something about poetry or politics. Did my younger self appreciate how he included me in the conversation, how he focused on someone 30 years his junior? This was not the ego of a man full of himself, but the humility of a teacher, the humility of someone who listens to hear poems to transcribe. Always the requirement for poets to put oneself second. 20 years later, we visited Irving at his Monkland Avenue home. He said, looking at me, "You have the same complexion that my mother had." For several years after that, driving by his home at night from where I worked, I would look at his house and see Irving through the living room window, sitting alone, smoking his pipe, writing into the long-lost night of his soul. I've kept a diary since I was about 15. And going over things that I wrote in the diary, I found meetings with poets and things like that, and that I've tried to incorporate in some of these poems. So in November 1971, I had been to a reading by the English poet Michael Horowitz, and after the reading, I met Horowitz and Frank Scott and his wife at McGill. It was a late fall evening at a reception at Thompson House on McTavish Avenue, meeting Marion Dale Scott, who recounted how Frank Scott and Buffy Glasgow, both old then, would talk about the past as they walked along Crescent Avenue, the same street they had walked when they were students at McGill back in the 1920s, publishing the Fortnightly Review. And I remember thinking at that time that Marion Scott was a lovely gray-haired lady. And later that evening, I spoke with Frank Scott, a tall, distinguished man, about poets he used to know and life in Montreal as it used to be. It's 50 years since that evening, and thinking now how life is short. Before long, we'll all be gone. Only the poems we've created will last into an unknown future and a day. Montreal has always been a center for poetry, and English poets from outside of Quebec often came and lived here for a number of years. Al Purdy and P.K. Page and Phyllis Webb and many others. So I'll finish with this poem that's on that subject. On Sherbrooke Street, near the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts, that's where P.K. Page lived when she moved to Montreal, not far from McGill's rotted gates. And passing through the gates to the university, on the second floor of the arts building was Louis Dudek's office, where Louis discussed literature with his students. One afternoon at Mansfield Book Mart, which of course became Paragraph, across from McGill, I heard someone say they were buying a book by Phyllis Webb and how they loved her poems. Another time, when buying Leonard Cohen's selected poems at Eaton's department store back in 1969, someone exclaimed to me their love for Cohen's work. Remembering this now, so many years later, and knowing that sometimes we feel adrift in the darkness without a rudder or compass, it is the consolation of poetry that we turn to, thankful that we have poets we love, poets who speak to our heart, mind, and soul. So thank you.
Secret mind, secret mind. Sacred the, sacred the, sacred the, sacred the, sacred the.
Regard.
Sacred.
My mind.
Sacred the, sacred the, sacred
My
the,
mind.
sacred
My
mind.
mind.
My mind.
Disorder as.
Sacred, sacred,
As.
sacred,
Regard.
sacred,
My mind.
sacred,
As. My mind.
the, sacred,
My
sacred,
mind. Disorder.
the,
My mind.
Regard
as.
sacred,
mind.
sacred,
Regard as. Regard as. Disorder as. Disorder as. Guard as. Guard as. Guard as.
sacred, 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 sacred.